Hello there, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. The minimum wage of $7.25 an hour has not been increased since 2009. The last time we saw a minimum wage hike was 2009, which is why the Biden administration is trying to push for $15 an hour minimum wage over several years. It's not going to happen at one time, it's going to happen over several years. Now, I did show you an interview on our channel yesterday with a Republican congressman who said that the $15 an hour minimum wage would decimate the travel industry in his state. He was from North Carolina. What he left out was the fact that this $15 an hour minimum wage is going to be gradually introduced over many years, which will allow employers the opportunity to ramp up. Well, in a very interesting turn of events, the Republicans have said they are open to a higher minimum wage. You'll see this brand new article from Bloomberg on your screen. Republican senators propose a minimum wage hike to $10. So this is a brand new update where they are proposing that the minimum wage hike actually be implemented, but not to $15. Keep in mind that the independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, there he is. What's up, Bernie? And Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, there she is. Hello, Congresswoman. As well as, most importantly, President Biden have been pushing for the $15 an hour minimum wage. But the president has said that this is unlikely to happen and it depends on the Senate parliamentarian. Now, this is more of a technical process where the Senate parliamentarian doesn't really have any binding power but can only make recommendations. At the end of the day, what the senators decide is what's more important. And it looks like, and this is encouraging, it looks like the Republican senators are budging. Keep in mind, we've had $7.25 an hour. And again, the last time the minimum wage was increased was in 2009. Now it's almost 12 years since the minimum wage was increased, and an increase from $7.25 to $10 an hour is not enough, but it is a step in the right direction. One of the reasons I think the minimum wage should be increased is the poverty cycle. The cycle of poverty that you see on your screen right now is something that impacts millions of our fellow Americans. It disproportionately impacts the African American community, the Latino community, and it disproportionately impacts individuals in the southern part of the United States of America. This cycle of poverty prevents an individual from not only getting access to the right education, the right tools, but it also prevents the individual from getting access to things like clean water, healthy food. It prevents the individual from being surrounded by or having access to intelligent individuals, mentors, if you will, who can then guide that person to get to the next level. When someone's in a cycle of poverty, they don't get access to the right opportunities. They simply don't have the tools. They simply don't have the ability to get to the next level. And this leads to health problems. It leads to issues in quality of life. And it leads to a fundamental perpetual cycle of poverty. So now let's get to these Republican senators. This is super interesting. Two Republican senators, specifically Mitt Romney from Utah. There he is. What's up, Mitt? And Tom Cotton from Arkansas released a proposal to boost the minimum wage to $10 an hour. Now, this is again well below the $15 an hour presented by President Biden, but it's a starting offer from the Republicans that does show that the Republicans are willing to budge. It looks like the minimum wage conversation will indeed make its way back into the stimulus. Keep in mind, the $15 an hour minimum wage is most likely dead, and the reason I say that is because Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, what's up, Joe? By the way, he's a Democrat. I call him the conservative Democrat, as well as Senator Kristen Sinema, the Democrat from Arizona, have indicated their opposition to the $15 an hour minimum wage. In fact, Manchin has specifically said that he's more in favor of $11 an hour, which makes sense for his constituents in West Virginia. So this is super important that the Republicans are willing to budge, because this means that the minimum wage is likely to go up thanks to the opening offer from the Republicans, which of course will be met by a counter offer from the Democrats. It remains to be seen whether other Republicans will support it, but this is better than having the entire $15 an hour dead in the water. So this does mean that something that was likely to end up on the chopping block is indeed going to make its way into the final proposal. I believe that this is a political move from the Republicans, because I've said this before, politics is about timing, it's about opportunity, and it's about tribalism. It's about us against them. If the $15 an hour minimum wage ended up dead in the water, then the Democrats would have an opportunity to say, aha, look, we pushed for it, but these Republicans, look at them, they didn't want you to get paid. And the Republicans don't want to be on that side of the argument. So they are proposing a smaller offer, in their mind, a more fiscally conservative offer, in order to be essentially the opening salvo with the Democrat. Now, what does all this have to do with what we can expect as far as the stimulus is concerned? It's very simple. Today, the Senate parliamentarian is expected to rule about whether the minimum wage can be included in the reconciliation bill. If the Senate parliamentarian actually rules that the budget reconciliation process can include the $15 an hour minimum wage, then guess what? The whole proposal from the two Republican senators, the Democrats are going to be like, we're just going to do $15 an hour minimum wage. But if the Senate parliamentarian says no, a ruling against the $15 an hour minimum wage would essentially make this a bipartisan effort, which means the Democrats would have no choice but to entertain the $10 an hour offer and negotiate until maybe they meet somewhere in the middle. So it really depends on what the Senate parliamentarian said. Again, the Senate parliamentarian is scheduled to rule as soon as today about whether President Biden can include the $15 an hour minimum wage as part of the special legislative procedure, the reconciliation process that the Democrats are using right now and are preparing right now to pass the massive $1.9 trillion stimulus package. Folks, I want to be clear. The $1,400 stimulus checks, the unemployment benefits are going to make it, unless something very dramatic happens. The question now is about the minimum wage. And I don't think that'll derail all the talks, but that now is going to be a final point of negotiation heading into this week and next week. Because remember, all this has to be done, has to be passed by the House and the Senate for the president to sign before the 14th of March. And because that's when the unemployment benefits deadline ends. As you know, first we have a package that then becomes a bill. Once the bill passes both the House and the Senate, then it goes to the president's desk, and when the president signs it, that's when it becomes law. Now, the one thing that will make the entire Romney-Cotton bill a non-starter for Democrats is it's associated with much stricter immigration controls, and I do believe that that's going to make it a non-starter for the Democrats. So even though this represents a concession, if you will, from the Republicans, it's going to be something that the Democrats look at and say, nah, we don't want it. So this would require I'm talking about the Cotton-Romney bill. This would require all employers to check the immigration status of employees and job applicants after 18 months. This is super important. Again, all employers would be required to check the immigration status of all employees and job applicants after 18 months. So currently, federal workers and employees in some states are required to check status using the E-Verify computerized system. And some Democrats have actually argued that long-term undocumented immigrants, in other words, if you're an undocumented immigrant and you've been in the country for a long time, Democrats have argued that they should be given a path to citizenship, and they have argued that the e-verification system should not be mandatory. Folks, all of this is tied to votes. The Democrats know that if there are more undocumented immigrants, they have more people voting for them, and the Republicans, of course, don't want that. So, folks, let me be clear, there are political overtones to all of this, but what's the bottom line? The bottom line is, will there be a higher federal minimum wage? I would wager to say at this point that it's looking likely, but we won't know until the Senate parliamentarian rules on the $15 an hour minimum wage, until we hear Chuck Schumer's response to the Romney-Cotton proposal, and most importantly, until the final version of the bill is passed by the Senate. Because keep in mind, we expect the House to pass the entire massive $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan this week, but it's going to be changed, it's going to be amended in the Senate, then it'll pass the Senate, and then it's going to have to pass the House again. So it's early days yet. Now, when I say early days, I mean probably I would say a week, less than 2 weeks away from knowing the fate of $15 an hour, or I should say the fate of the Romney-Cotton $10 an hour. But things are moving along. If you had asked me 24 hours ago what was happening to the $15 an hour, I would have said it's dead in the water. But now, I think that the talks are, in a sense, revived. I did mention that states have their own minimum wage independent of, overriding, if you will, the federal minimum wage. And this is an irony that was pointed out by Brian Tyler Cohen. You'll see Brian Tyler Cohen's tweet on your screen. He's a political commentator, and he pointed out that Tom Cotton is proposing a bill to raise the minimum wage to $10 an hour, which I reported for you in this video. The minimum wage is already $11 an hour in the state of Arkansas. So this is extremely interesting that you would propose a bill that is lower, a federal minimum wage bill that is lower than the state minimum wage in your own state. What does that tell you? Does that tell you that this is about timing, this is about opportunity, and this is about tribalism? Or does this tell you that Tom Cotton actually is being a good guy instead of a hypocrite? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Also, one more important comment from Senator Cotton. He said, American workers today compete against millions of illegal immigrants for too few jobs with wages that are too low. And he said eliminating one of the key drivers of illegal immigration would boost wages. That was a comment from Cotton. And under the Romney-Cotton proposal, the current $7.25 federal minimum wage would rise to $10 an hour 4 years after the pandemic is declared over, and the wage would be linked to the consumer price index inflation measure thereafter. So if inflation goes up, the minimum wage goes up, which, by the way, is essentially an inflation version of the automatic stabilizer I've talked about. If you've been following my channel, I've talked about the automatic stabilizer. The way the automatic stabilizer works is if unemployment rates go up in a state, in other words, if a state is struggling, let's say with a local disaster, this happens to be a natural disaster, the pandemic, but let's say a state is struggling, a state like Texas, for example, if unemployment rates go up, then the unemployment benefits go up and stimulus benefits go up because a state can then take measures to take care of their own residents. Now, this can happen at a state level or at a federal level. So that's called the automatic stabilizer method. I do believe we'll have an automatic stabilizer at some point in the future, because then there's no need for the House to be involved, the Senate to be involved, the President to be involved, and there's no need for politics and shenanigans. But as far as this minimum wage measure from Romney and Cotton is concerned, it does in the long run make sense, but I believe that the immigration component would be a non-starter for Democrats. Those are the political implications. And businesses with fewer than 20 employees under the Romney-Cotton plan would have a slower phase-in of 6 years, unlike the Democratic proposal, which would require everybody to, adopt a higher minimum wage. And the sponsors of the Romney-Cotton bill say that the increase would affect 21 states that don't currently have a minimum wage of $10 or above, although 9 of those are slated to reach $10 before the bill takes effect. Because remember, each state has its own guidelines also for minimum wage. So that is this complex discussion. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think about this major shift in the discussions as far as minimum wage is concerned. Please click the like button. Please subscribe. Please enable notifications. I would really appreciate that. We talked about minimum wage. That is the minimum thing that I ask you to do for me. I would really appreciate that. That helps out the YouTube algorithm a lot. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.